Hi guys, James back with another video, and this one, if you clicked on it, is called Top 10 Alternate Cuts. And the reason I named it that is I've done about 3 other videos along this line. The first one was the Top 10 Director's Cuts, versions of the film that is essentially the director's vision, the director's final say on the matter, you could say. And followed that with Top 10 Theatrical Cuts, basically the released film as presented in the theater, which, according to some interviews I've read, some directors consider the version that was in the theaters to be their director's cut. It's just not labeled as such, with an exception being Eli Roth's Green Inferno. That one, not when it was in the theater, I believe, but when it was released on Blu-ray, that one was called Green Inferno Director's Cut. But there's only been one version of the film, according to him. Anyway, then I did Top 10 Director's Cuts Part 2, just more of the same from following up on the, building on the Director's Cuts Part 1 list. Now, this one, Top 10 Alternate Cuts, is sort of a mixture of director's cuts, producer's cuts, unrated versions, extended cuts, final cuts, and sort of like just ones that aren't specifically one or the other, or some extra like director's cuts that didn't make it to the other list because they didn't make it to the list or I forgot, which I do on occasion. Anyway, without further ado, I will start with number 10. Before that, spoilers. Okay, so number 10, we're going to start with Highlander Endgame. This was the 4th Highlander movie, first one I saw in the theater. And this one I know gets a lot of hate. I love it. It shows its age a bit now, because I think it came out in 2000, so this is like it's like 23 years old now. It gets the hate. I love it, partially because it brings together like the series premiere of the Highlander TV show. It brought together Connor MacLeod and Duncan MacLeod, one from the TV world, one from the movie world. And Duncan gets his first appearance in a Highlander film, and you have Connor in there too. Now, when you, as I said, I already said spoilers, so I'm covered. In the theater, you watch the movie, and then towards the end, it's believed that Duncan's love interest, the woman he married when he was younger, and then essentially murdered, so that she would come back as an immortal. And let me see. I just want to get her name and her character's name right. Yeah, he knew she was essentially an immortal, so they have to die a violent death in order to their immortality to trigger. So he murders her on their wedding night. She comes back, hates him for it, and then leaves, and then ends up joining up with the villain Jacob Kell, who, by the way, is one of my favorite one of my all-time favorite movie villains in general, not just in Highlander TV shows or movies. Let me go. Highlander Endgame. Actress Lisa Barbutia played Kate MacLeod, who later goes by the name Faith. Anyway, you're led to believe that Jacob Kell basically murders all the rest of his crew, his gang, to gain all their power to go up against Duncan, who has killed his fair share of immortals, and then Connor serves himself up to Duncan because otherwise he wouldn't have the strength to beat him. Anyway, at the end of the movie, he goes, you hear the awesome Lorraine McKinnon song, Bonnie Portmore, as Duncan visits Kate's grave, and the movie ends. Well, in the producer's cut, as it's labeled, there's several things added back into the movie, including, and this sticks out to me when I watch it, the final battle, Duncan and Jacob Kell, they replay a few scenes, like action scenes. You see it more than once, and it is noticeable. I'm willing to forgive that. After he kills Kell, he's walking. I think he's walking in a mall or some big public place, and he feels an immortal's presence, and it's Kate. And she says, well, for whatever reason, Jacob Kell made his choice, as in she wasn't dead, because you still see the version that leads you to believe she's dead. You still see, like, her close her eyes, and he does this, and you assume he kills her. Theatrical, he does kill her. Producer's cut, he lets her live. And it seemed you could see it as a cheat. I just like it because they get to be together. Not that she's in the follow-up Highlander film, Highlander the Source, which I don't know that I really recommend that one. Anyway, so that's why this one's at number 10. That's Highlander Endgame, the producer's cut. Okay, number 9. Number 9, we have The Strangers. The Strangers was Brian Bertino's directorial debut. This one came out in, what was it? I want to say 2004? 2008. And this one had Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler as a couple who are staying out at friend's place out in the country, out in the middle of nowhere. Basically, he proposes to her, she turns him down. They go to stay overnight there, where he had prepared all this celebration thing for her saying yes, and she said no. Anyway, it's awkward. Anyway, they are terrorized all night by 3 figures in masks. You know this if you've seen the movie. There's slight difference between the theatrical version of The Strangers and the unrated version that was released on home video, on Blu-ray. And aside from extra scenes of violence, which I don't really notice because it's just violent scene. Anyway, there may be a little more blood or something. But there's it's sort of like a bookend, or there's an extra scene, and you see, like after at the end of the movie, Scott Speedman's character is dead, noticeably dead. Liv Tyler, if you watch the theatrical, you assume she's dead or going to die. You should get the kids, the Mormon kids or something, discover the crime scene, and Liv Tyler's character wakes up and screams. But in the unrated version, it's where her body placement is when the kids come in and she screams. She's not where she starts. And at the end of the movie, in the unrated version, she's crawling, trying to get to her cell phone. I think it starts to ring, or she's gonna call someone. Anyway, she's crawling towards her cell phone, and the main guy, the main bad guy, who was the guy in the sack mask, comes back in, different clothes on, without the sack on his head. You don't see his face. He basically walks over her, kneels in front of her, picks up the cell phone, closes it, takes it, and leaves, assuming that she is going to die. But it's very ballsy of him to like come back without the mask on, even though they already revealed themselves in the movie. But comes back, sees she's still alive, takes the phone that she was going to use to call, and leaves, because presuming she's going to die, which, seen as she wasn't in the sequel or reference, I think it's basically a known fact or implied that she dies as well. They both got stabbed repeatedly. Anyway, so that's the Strangers unrated version. I like both movies equally. That part at the end isn't that important to me, because they didn't. Had she ended up being part of the sequel, it would have been a more significant. But I just like the core of the movie is what I like the most. Anyway, so that's the Strangers. Number 8 is Richard Kelly's follow-up to Donnie Darko, Southland Tales. Now this movie gets a lot of hate, and I can only kind of understand, because the movie is confusing, a little hard to follow, but I thought Dwayne Johnson and Justin Timberlake did great jobs in the movie. And this movie was highly anticipated, Donnie Darko being a cult film status or whatever. And he took his, I don't know if it was entirely unfinished, slightly unfinished film dubbed the Cannes Cut to Cannes Film Festival, and it basically got destroyed critically, and audience, everyone apparently hated it. They had to re-edit it down to what essentially became the theatrical version and the home video version. And then years later, Shout Factory? I think it was Shout Factory or Arrow Video. Put out the two-disc collector's edition, which had the theatrical cut and the Cannes cut, and like a making of documentary and stuff. A bunch of goodies on there. And I had heard that the effects were unfinished or whatever. And I thought this Cannes cut was pretty seamless. And I prefer it to the theatrical. I still like the theatrical a lot. I prefer it to the theatrical just because I think it still flows just as well. But there's more of Kevin Smith's character in it. Like under the heavy makeup and the wheelchair and stuff like that. There's more of Janeane Garofalo's character, Justin Timberlake. I just think it's an all-around better version of an already great film, in my opinion. So, there isn't a lot that I noticed was different aside from the additional Kevin Smith and Janeane Garofalo stuff, and a little bit different in Justin Timberlake. If you listen to the commentary, Richard Kelly talks about some of the differences, but it's been a while since I listened to it. Anyway, so that's Southland Tales, number 8. Number 7, we have Dr. Sleep. Mike Flanagan's long-awaited follow-up to The Shining. Like Stephen King wrote a follow-up to his own book, The Shining, called Dr. Sleep, and then they finally made a movie of it. And it is a follow-up to... oh boy. I believe it's a follow-up to... I'm trying to remember if they said it was a follow-up to the Stanley Kubrick version of the film The Shining, or the book The Shining. Either way, based on the book Dr. Sleep, and I can appreciate Kubrick's Shining. I prefer the the miniseries, the TV movie miniseries that was released later on with Steven Weber in it. I thought that was a lot scarier. But The Shining, Kubrick's Shining being a film by Kubrick, you got to appreciate the visuals. Anyway, I thought this movie was fantastic. And the theatrical version is about 2.5 hours, but it doesn't feel like it. And the director's cut is about 3 hours. It's about a half hour longer. It's kind of like what they did with Batman versus Superman. Now, that was like a total 180 where you turned like a mess of a film into a great film. This was just a great film into an even better film. And I've seen it a few times, and off the top of my head, I don't notice any differences in the content. There's just more stuff, and it's pretty seamless how it's worked in, the extra half hour. But they divide the movie into chapters, kind of like what they did with Zack Snyder's Justice League, where there's like chapter breaks. And like Zack Snyder's Justice League, there was like a black screen with a chapter name. This one, I think it's just, it goes to the next scene, and then there's a chapter scene with a number and stuff. So there's not much I can really say about it, and just that it was sort of like Southland Tales, where it was an improvement on an already great film. So I recommend either version. Maybe watch the theatrical first, then the director's cut, just to see if you notice if there was anything more. Anyway, so that's number 7, Dr. Sleep. Number 6, this one's on here for fun. I don't know who else will appreciate this besides me and my buddy Bevan. This is Beerfest. This was the fourth film. Oh, no. Anyway, it's the Broken Lizard crew, the guys who did Super Troopers and Puddle Cruiser, Dukes of Hazzard remake, Club Dread. And they came back with Beerfest. Just all about drinking, going to like titular beer fest, drinking Olympics kind of thing. And the reason it's on here is I don't recall. I mean, I saw it once, I saw it like a couple times in the theater, and then many times on DVD and Blu-ray, the unrated version. And I don't remember. I've seen the unrated version too many times to remember what the differences are between the theatrical and the unrated version. But every time I went over to Bevan's place, we'd check the movie network that he had to see if Beerfest was playing, because it was playing all the time, it seemed, for quite a while. And so if it would be on, we'd put it on, like playing games or whatever like that. We had Beerfest going on. But there was always one scene that we went to, and I have never been able to find it in the theatrical version or the unrated version. It was on the version that was on the movie network, so pay TV. And there's a scene where the guy, what's his name? He has like the glasses and like the curly hair. I'm trying to remember his name. It is Steve Lemmy, plays Fink. And he got drunk and genetically spliced like frogs and rabbits or something like that. Some unholy hybrid animal. And he has him in like a burlap sack, and he brings him into the bar and plops him on the bar, the one they own. And it's supposed to be these creatures inside moving around. In the theatrical, and I think in the unrated version, you see the sack on the counter, on the bar counter, just like moving, like there's creatures inside. Well, in the movie network version, they're sitting there, and you see this hand creep across the screen and move the bag as if the creature's in it, and then move off. And you see it nowhere else, and we just get such a kick out of it every single time. That's the only reason this is on the list for mine and Bevan's enjoyment. So, number 6, Beerfest. I recommend whatever version you can find. The movie's just a classic, just like Super Troopers. Number 5, we have Alexander. This one's called Alexander Revisited, the final cut. It was the third released version of Alexander, the Oliver Stone film about Alexander the Great, starring Colin Farrell, Val Kilmer, Angelina Jolie, etc. Because he put out the theatrical version of Alexander, which I enjoyed. Then he released the director's cut when it hit home video, which was shorter, which I also enjoyed, but I think I remember enjoying the theatrical version more, and they rearranged the order of some scenes. And then a little while later, he puts out Alexander Revisited, the final cut, and it's like a 3.5-4 hour version of the film, which he says himself on the DVD and Blu-ray. He just basically threw in everything, and it rearranges some stuff again. And I enjoyed it the most out of those 3 released versions up to that point. And eventually he put out a 4th version, the ultimate cut. And it was on DVD. I believe it was on DVD or Blu-ray. I think it was Blu-ray. But it contained the digital copy of the theatrical cut, which hadn't been available previously. And I, years later, picked up off Google Play the Ultimate Cut, because I used to own the Ultimate Cut and never watched it. And I picked up the Ultimate Cut on digital off Google Play and watched it. And if you've read about it, it's that basically the final cut, and he kind of scaled it back just a little, because he put a little bit too much in there. So final cut's the longest, then ultimate cut, then theatrical cut, then director's cut. But I would put my enjoyment as the final cut, ultimate cut, theatrical cut, director's cut. I like everything that he threw back in there, and there's a particular line, and I'm fairly certain that it's only in the final cut, not in any of the 3 versions, and it's towards the end, right after Alexander has died. You hear Anthony Hopkins' character Ptolemy saying, for the next, immediately everyone was fighting over not his remains, but his body and where to keep it, and all the territory that he commanded. And for the next 20 or 30 years, it was being divvied up, and he said, like, I think Alexander, and it's like all this stuff, then he goes, I think Alexander would have been disappointed in us. And I thought that was a really great line, that after you've seen the other versions, it's missing, it's lacking, those not having that line. Anyway, that's the only thing I really notice, is that little part near the end. But I think it flows a lot better, having everything in there and the way he arranged it. I don't think the ultimate cut was necessary, but it's his movie. Do what he wants. Okay, number 4, The Punisher, the movie about the Marvel character from 2004. This is not the Dolph Lundgren version of the movie, nor the Punisher Warzone sequel, which I thought was pretty good. I mean, Ray Stevenson looked a lot more like the comic version of Frank Castle, the Punisher, but I thought Thomas Jane's version is my favorite, not having seen Daredevil season 2 or 3 or the Punisher TV show. I've only seen clips of John Bernthal as Frank Castle's the Punisher. But this one is called the it says on the DVD, it's only available on DVD, it says the extended cut, but it's also referred to as the director's cut. And sometimes you'll see on the DVD or Blu-ray, it'll say extended director's cut. So it could be one or the other, or both. Doesn't matter. I'm calling this the extended - director cut. And not counting the version where you can watch the animated Iraq scene that opens the movie. There's an animated scene that was never shot. They animated it and had the actors voice the parts. Excuse me. It's fine. It's not that necessary, in my opinion. But what stands out to me as the big difference is his partner, Jimmy Weeks. You find out that he's the one that sold out Frank to Howard Saint, John Travolta's crime boss character. He was a gambler in deep, and then Howard Saint basically threatened him, and he gave up Frank Castle's locations, family, and stuff like that. And that's how Howard Saint found him and like killed all his family, his wife, his son, and his extended family. And then you find out that Frank discovers that it was Jimmy, and he goes to him and basically forces him to kill himself because he was responsible for this and it's all his fault and guilty and all that stuff like that. That's the only really thing I noticed, was that it's a plot hole where you just assume Howard Saint had all these resources and that's how he found Frank's family and tried to kill Frank's family and him. Well, you find it's a more direct through line that it's because his friend and former partner, who had a gambling addiction and was in deep to Howard Saint, he's the one who turned on him, and then Frank delivers his justice on his former friend and partner. Anyway, so I like both versions. I like the extended more because it's just more of a good thing, and it gives that more deeper explanation for me. So, number 4, Punisher. Number 3, we have Sucker Punch, the Zack Snyder's film that I believe followed up with, is it 300? I believe. And this was the original, his first original story that he came up with, and very fantasy based, and there's debates on what actually occurs in the film and who's actually telling the story. I won't get into that, but it's a girl who gets taken from her parents die, and she tries to kill her mom dies. She tries to kill her abusive, I think, stepfather, accidentally kills her younger sibling, and gets taken away, committed to an asylum. And then in the asylum, she meets these other girls, they form a friendship, and as an escape, they pretend that the asylum is a brothel that they work at. And all the orderlies are either bouncers or guards, and the head orderly is the boss, and on the surface she's being scheduled for what is it called, where they cut out a part of your brain, lobotomy. And in their fantasy world, she's instead of it's a doctor specialist coming in to perform the lobotomy on her, it's the high roller is coming in, and she has to get ready because she's the best dancer, and she puts all these guys into a trance. And you got Scott Glenn there as a mystical mentor, saying you have to get all these special items in order to be free. It's just a wild, crazy movie, and it's easier to just enjoy the ride and maybe try and understand some of it. Don't think too hard about it, and it's visually stunning too, and the music is great. The reason it's on this list is because on Blu-ray they put out an extended cut of the film, and like the other ones that I mentioned, I don't notice a lot of differences between the theatrical and the extended cut, and I would recommend either. Maybe watch the theatrical first, then the extended. What I notice distinctly every time is the high roller, the specialist doctor who's coming in to perform the lobotomy on Baby Doll, I think that's the main character's name, is played by John Hamm. And you see him at the very end, comes in and performs the lobotomy, and you're just like, did you see that? She looks like she's smiling or whatever. Gets freaked out by the look on Baby Doll's face after he does the little tap with the hammer. In the extended version, there's a whole monologue he gives where he comes to the room the room he's in with Baby Doll, because he's the high roller, comes in and he gives this whole speech where I don't want to just take you, I want you to give yourself to me, I want you to understand blah 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 blah, because it's a relationship they have. And it's a great monologue, which ends with him tapping the hammer doing the lobotomy, where it just clicks to that in the theatrical, and you get this whole great monologue by John Hamm in the extended version, which I highly recommend. If you like the movie at all, check out the extended version. Number 2, we have Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Now, I saw this in the theater, and I'd seen it many times on DVD, and there's some slight differences between the theatrical version and the DVD, where it says right on it, with additional scenes not included in the theatrical release. You think oh, well, it's an alternate version. It doesn't say extended cut, doesn't say director's cut, there's just extra scenes, or different scenes. And they're noticeable, when he's pretending to be the German dolphin expert or whatever. And in the club, I think when Cannibal Corpse is on stage and he's doing other stuff, there's just various things scattered throughout the movie that just little things that are a little different if you go back and watch the theatrical version. But my younger brother and I saw a version on TV, and this does not exist on the DVD, the Blu-ray, or in the theatrical version. And there's extra scenes where he's going to find Ray Finkel. He goes to a bar, and a guy tries to get into a bar fight with him, and you see him, he takes out his contact, and he goes tink on the glass on the bar and breaks it, and he's trying to use it as a knife, a stabbing one. And there's other stuff when he's in the asylum, going undercover, pretending to be a mental patient to get info on Ray Finkel. It's just, there's some hilarious scenes that aren't in either of the other versions, that are only on the TV version. And I don't know if it's still broadcast that way, but that's how we saw it, and that's the only way we've seen it. So, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Similar to what they did with Waterworld. There was the theatrical version, and then the version that was put on TV that had the extended scenes in the movie, but at the end that showed that the dry land was the top of Mount Everest. And then they later put that out as an extended version in a 2-disc special edition with the theatrical version. I'm hoping they do that with Ace Ventura one day, but I don't know. Okay, number one, and because this one infuriates me as much as when I talked about The X, also known as Fast Track, that the movie starring Zach Braff, where he got married, he's married, had a baby, goes to work for his wife's dad, and basically the theatrical version I thought was hilarious, and then the unrated cut, they basically took out every funny scene in the movie almost, and I wanted to break it. I wanted to physically take out the disc and break it. Well, there's a similar, slightly similar to a lesser degree, they did with Sweetest Thing. The unrated version was the version I saw first, and it's funny. Its age wears, it shows a little bit. It's not as funny as it used to be. Excuse me, but the opening is mainly what I'm referring to. And you get these montage of guys talking about Christina, Cameron Diaz's character, how like she would all lead them all on, then left them high and dry. And Mitch Mulaney, a comedic actor, would pops in and out of the montage like 3 or 4 times, and keeps referring to her as a lesbian because she rejected him. And just the stuff he keeps saying gets increasingly funnier and funnier and funnier, and it leads to him going on like a complete balls out rant about her, and then the camera pans out and he's yelling on his rant, and then a bunch of girls surround him and start beating him up with baseball bats, and then the movie starts. Well, in the theatrical version, that montage is still there, but I think Mitch Mulaney has maybe 1 or 2 of his like 3 or 4 or 5 clips in there, and that's it. And then they basically cut out the funniest parts of that opening montage, and I think some of the stuff throughout the movie. But you're watching and you're just like, what? No, where did you took it out? What? Where's the parts I looked forward to the most are the ones that they took out, and it just, like I said, not as much as the X, but it kind of like gut punches you. You're just like, oh no, you ruined it. So I never saw it in the theater, so I could only imagine like I would have found it funny in the theater, and then even funnier. But it's like when I saw the Kingdom of Heaven in the theater, I thought it was a good movie. You see the director's cut, it's a great movie. Then you go back and watch the theatrical version again, and it's a gut punch. It's gutted. They gutted the movie to put it in the theaters. Like just the big, and I've talked about this before, right? So I don't need to go over it again. But that's a similar feeling that I got from this. Anyway, so I rattled on long enough about these. I appreciate you if you watch to the end. So, like, comment, subscribe, subscribe. Yeah, all are welcome. And I hope you enjoyed this one. And I enjoyed making it too. And I'll see you on the next one. Toodles.